Hi, my name is Carter Razink, and I'm the CEO and co-founder of DropChain. Today, we're going to talk about how can you freeze or unfreeze a token or NFT or just generally an asset using the DropChain tools and the DropChain API. If you haven't yet, please create a free account at below. There's a link below at dropchain.network, and then do the Quickstart tutorial because that's going to give you some context behind everything you need to know to get started. You can build both no code and code, but for this example, we're going to use JavaScript. And then a little bit of background about the freeze and unfreeze flow. Imagine you're building an NFT, or rather, you're building a Web3 app, and you want to, in this case, there's an example, soulbound NFTs, or that you're building a game and you want to give something to someone, but you don't want them to allow them to sell it or send it or trade it or do anything with it except for own it and hold it. In that context, you can freeze it. And maybe after some condition has been met, you want to unfreeze that asset. And so you want to take and allow them to move it around to do whatever they would like. If that's the case, we have a solution for you. We have freeze and unfreeze endpoints. You can build this into your app and give your Web3 app robust functionality, and you don't need to know anything about smart contracts. So we have the Python SDK here, but we're going to show off the JavaScript example. And for all of the API calls, for both the freeze and unfreeze and every DropChain API call, there's two pieces. The first one is the API key. And so within the Quickstart guide, we go through this process of generating your first API key. We're on the console.dropchain.network within your API dashboard. You see an API key here. This is simply so that we can show this process, but you should keep this very secure. You shouldn't show it off. And if you do show it off or you lose it or you expose it somehow, you should delete it with this delete button here on the right, and then generate a new one, and it'll be good as new. But going forward, make sure you use either environment variables or secrets manager if you're using cloud infrastructure to manage your API keys. But for now, we're going to go back and we're going to show the second part, which is the body. And so this grabs information from your developer console as well as information from your app. So your app ID is a unique app ID specific to your app, your developer account. Your asset ID is your unique asset identifier specific to the NFT or token that you have created that you now want to freeze. So if you created maybe a sword and that sword is now stuck to the person who owns it for your Web3 game, you'd include the asset ID to the sword in this field. And then the receiver ID is the person, UID is the person who is using your app and is wanting to or like you want to freeze their asset. And the user ID one is just your test account or your development account, your app that you're using to send the transaction on behalf of. And now we're going to integrate the DropChain asset freeze flow. So we're using the DropChain tutorial app. So we're doing this natively within a pre-made setup here. If you want to use this, there's a link below, but you can do this with just a JavaScript fetch body. So we have a body here, and this is attached to the front end. So we're going to just fill this out, right? We have the server backend here that's processing the transaction, so that just for a little bit of context, you're going to send this transaction to the V1 freeze asset testnet. And that's the freeze asset testnet, which is going to send that to the API backend here. So that's the flow we have. But if you don't have a backend flow, you just send it directly to this field or this URL. But we're going to now set this up. We're going to grab our app ID. And then maybe we're going to want to grab an NFT. And actually, you know what? Before we do this, let's just mint an NFT or a token real quick. I think we have asset mint. It looks like we have this set up. Let's do freeze NFT. We're going to just call it that so that we can freeze it. Freeze F NFT. Let's just call it F NFT. Sure. And this is our first user ID. So if we go back here, we go back here on the bottom. This is our first test user account. In the previous examples, we minted an NFT, and so we're just going to mint another one. So we click Mint NFT, and we have minted an NFT called Freeze NFT. And then we're going to opt in this user 2 into it. So we're going to duplicate, opt in. We're going to actually go back to user 1. We're going to grab the asset ID, and then we're going to make sure that our test user 2 is opted into receiving this freeze NFT. And opt-in is true. And so now we can successfully send. Go to asset send. We can send the asset 1 ID, paste it over here. And we're going to send it from user 1. So 0ZD is user 1, who we just minted it with. User 1. We're going to send it to user 2, which is AAX, receiver. And we're going to do send NFT transaction. And when we look at the transaction ID, so we have a transaction ID, and we're going to just verify that this was sent correctly. We sent one freeze NFT from user 1 to user 2, and now we're gonna freeze it. And so let's go to freeze. We have the app ID, the asset ID. Let's just grab this asset ID from the asset mint. Is right here, and that's returned when you mint an NFT for the first time. You can also index with a different previous video, to grab that ID. If you lost it or forget, you can just say, all right, hey, here's my user ID. What assets do I own? And with that, we're going to copy that and put that into asset freeze. And user 1, test user 1 has created it, so they're going to be the sender, because only the creator of the NFT can freeze an NFT or an asset. And then the receiver is the person who is getting frozen. So I have an NFT, I'm going to get frozen. So I'm going to put that user 2, which is the one we just sent the asset to. And so it looks good. I saved it, and let's freeze the asset. I'm going to duplicate and go to freeze. I'm going to send a request. And it looks like freeze state is true. So it was successful. We successfully minted an NFT, opted in minted with user 1, opted in with user 2, sent it from user 1 to user 2, and then we froze it. And so what happens if we try to do something interesting? Let's try to swap. Let's send the NFT from user 2 back to user 1. See what happens. So we just changed user receiver and user 1. So that we're just trying to send it from our test account 2 to our test account 1. And what we should see, it shouldn't work, right? It's frozen. We're trying to send it. And surprise, surprise, unexpected algorithm error, transaction with the transaction ID and the asset ID frozen in AKED, which if we go back here, AKED is the wallet address, which is saying, our test user 2 is frozen. We can't send it because it can't move. And so this means that you froze it successfully. Good job. And imagine now, okay, they do something, they achieve something. Now we want to unfreeze it. So how do we do that? Well, first we need to go to unfreeze this version on our test tutorial app. And we need to fill this out. So we are going to take our app ID, as we do every time. Take the app ID, put it in here. We need to take the asset ID that we just minted, put it in here. And the user ID, user 1 user ID, is the person who has minted the NFT. So it's always going to be your account that has control over the asset. Only the person who has minted it can freeze the asset or unfreeze the asset. So that's going to be user 1. and user 1 user ID is my test user 1, and then user 2 is the person who owns the asset. So this is the person who is receiving the unfreeze transaction, or in this case it's unfreeze. It could be the freeze transaction. And so we're going to save the front end. We're going to go to unfreeze, and we're going to send the request. And we should see a freeze is now false on the asset, and a successful transaction ID response. Freeze state is false, looking good. Just to check it, let's check the transaction ID. And yes, freeze status is false. So we're good. The sender is the creator. The updated account is AKED, which, if you remember, the creator is MQSK user 1. AKED is the person who owns it. And now it's unfrozen. So if we go back here, it was previously frozen. Let's send the request, and it should have no problem. And it works now. And just like that, you have implemented really cool, really interesting and complex and robust Web3 functionality into your Web3 app without needing to know anything about smart contracts. You can mint an NFT, send it to anyone else, and then freeze it if they can't move it. A great example of this is someone who's using this to build ticketing solutions. Maybe they don't want to allow scalpers to resell it. If you buy a ticket for the first time, you have to own it. That's a perfect use case of this freeze and unfreeze flow. Anyone, including yourself, can build really cool Web3 apps. We have experience in tech to allow you to build both no-code apps as well as code apps. If you haven't yet, please use the link below or go to dropchain.network and create your free account to get started, and then join the Discord. I'm in there, and my co-founder is in there helping people who are building Web3 apps for the first time every day.